a lot of people understand the importance of the feet, and then people understand the importance of the pelvis, and you get different ideas of like everything stems from the feet, everything adapts to that, or other people are like pelvis is the centerpiece of the body. Everything happens from the pelvis and then the feet respond to that. When you're doing assessments, are you seeing one or the other? Is like, are the feet adapting to the pelvic position, or is it the other way around?
Great question. I think there's two influences. There's top down, as you mentioned, but also bottom up. Our foot is the first thing to obviously hit the ground. It's the first thing to interact with the ground, which sends basically an entire cascade of signaling back up to our pelvis, all the way up to our cranium and head. So we can't ignore the fact that the foot is going to be the thing that is going to give that influence back up. But if our pelvis is in a position that doesn't allow our feet to get that proper gait cycle, that proper transition from the heel to the toe, and then from the other heel to the toe. Let's say, for example, my hips were forward on both sides. Then my weight is more on my forefoot. And then when I strike the ground, I'm not going to be able to go to heel to toe in just normal walking. Normally, I'm probably going to go more midfoot to toe. And then the gait cycle is interrupted. And then my foot position during walking or running is interrupted. And then I'm not going to be able to have the ability to get that bottom up influence. So when I address someone, I'm almost always assuming there are no glaring things going on within the foot or the shin or the knee. I'm almost always going to start with things more proximal, closer to the midline of our body, like our pelvis and our rib cage, because those are the big boys that influence that top-down ability for the gait cycle to even happen in the first place. But I think it's important to not separate these two things from each other, because let's say, for example, I only did hip mobility stuff and I thought not about the feet at all. Then I would probably be handicapped myself a little bit on that, because I think when we do a drill, we should be thinking, okay, so let's say, for example, I wanted to get someone to feel their heel more when they struck the ground and get a little bit more heel reference so that they could have that nice heel to toe. I would probably want to put them in a position where they are going to recruit the muscles that should be happening when we are striking the ground with our heel. That is usually some degree of hamstring, and that is some degree of also our oblique should be firing a little bit, and we should also be in a slight posterior pelvic orientation. When we strike the ground with our foot, we start to move towards a posterior pelvic orientation from a place of anterior orientation. So when we go through that, we are going to basically need to create a neurological association between the heel, the hamstring, and also a slight posterior pelvic tilt. Because then we're going to educate our brain of, hey, when my heel's on the ground, I want this hamstring to start to posteriorly orient and create hip extension. Because when we strike the ground, we go heel, midfoot, where hip extension happens, and then that leg is straight. So we're going to start to educate the body in that manner. Or we could just do all these different isolated hip mobility drills, and then we're not really educating the body on what we want to happen when we want it to happen.